Hey there, superstar. In this video, I'm going to share with you my personal journey. In today's video, I have something I think a little bit special to share with you. Maybe you've watched some of my other videos and you've gotten to know me through my business content or my personal development content. And in today's video, I thought I'd take the opportunity to share with you my personal story, my own journey, all the way from the beginning in a nutshell. I won't make it really long and boring. But I thought I'd walk you through my journey as well as some of the highlights along the way, as well as what that's led me to doing here and now today in the world. So let's start at the very beginning, why don't we? My parents are Cuban American, and I was born in Medellin, Colombia. Now, I know I might not look and sound like I was born in Medellin, Colombia, but actually my first language is Spanish, and I didn't even speak English till I was about 3 or 4 years old. We moved around a lot when I was a little kid, and as the child of Cuban American immigrants who really wanted to live the American dream and make it in this country, I learned something very early on, and that was that my parents really valued hard work, success, and achievement. From a very young age, I knew that if I wanted my parents to be proud of me, I had to do really well in school. And so from a very young age, I became a great student. I worked hard. I did all my homework. I got straight A's in school. And essentially, I learned how to succeed and achieve in the school environment. I ended up going to a really good college and graduated that college with honors. I studied psychology and mathematics together. I did a combined major. And then I went out into the business world. And I actually struggled to find a job. I was surprised. I thought everybody would be knocking down my door to hire me, but they weren't. I don't know if it was a function of the times. And I finally landed a job in New York City, of all places. I was so excited to live in New York. It was a dream of mine. I'd seen it in the movies, on TV, and I had this fantasy of what it would be like to live in New York City. And it actually wasn't like that at all. New York, to me, felt very crowded and oppressive even. I felt a lot of anxiety and stress living in New York. It was go, go, go all the time. And I always felt like I was fighting even for my place on the sidewalk to walk down the street. So I ended up moving back to New Hampshire, which is where I went to college at Dartmouth College. I moved back to New Hampshire and I became a high school teacher and tutor. And I worked with high school students to help them with math and Spanish, the two things that I knew really, really well. I did that for a couple years until I got kind of bored of living in New Hampshire, and I moved to the big city, to Boston. And I worked in Boston. I found a job on Newbury Street working in an art gallery, which is where I picked up some sales skills. And I used those sales skills to end up getting another job, and I moved all the way down to Miami, got into sales in Miami in the real estate industry. Long story short there, I ended up not really liking the industry and getting into publishing. So as you can see, I moved around a lot, and that's really important because I moved around a lot as a child, and then I moved around a lot in my career. And part of that was I never felt at home anywhere. I never felt like I really found my way. I didn't know where my place was in the world. I didn't know what I was meant to do in this world. And so I just kept kind of bouncing around and allowing myself to be pulled and led by circumstances, by opportunities, by other people. I call that my phase of living from the outside in. And I continued to do that. Actually, I worked in publishing. I worked my way up the corporate ladder, so to speak. I spent time in the editorial department, and then I made my way into the publishing department. Meantime, I got my MBA. Since I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, maybe I should go get an MBA because number one, I'm really good at school and I know how to do that well. And I feel like I needed maybe an ego boost at the time. And also because I figured business could apply to anything. And I'm really glad that I did that. I went to business school. I graduated with 4.0, number one in my class. I was really good at business, at the theory of business. That's important, by the way. Talk about that later. And then ended up working, when I got my MBA, I got a promotion at the magazine that I was working for, and I became the associate publisher of the magazine, which meant I started leading a team. And that was one of the hardest things I ever did in my life. And I led the team on sales, on marketing, on branding. I developed events. Basically, I was thrown into the lion's den of this magazine that was really struggling. And I was put in charge of it and told, fix it, make it better, make it make money. So I had to touch every aspect of that magazine. And over the course of about 3.5 years, I was able to turn the magazine around. And I really found something that I was good at and that I enjoyed, which was strategy and leading this team. And at the same time, I was also really unhappy in my personal life. I was not taking really good care of myself. I was a workaholic. You know, from childhood, I'd gotten this message that as long as you succeed and achieve, that you'll be happy and that everything will be great. And what ended up happening was I got to this point in my career where I was in my mid 30s, or early 30s. Oh my God, it's been so long. And I did all the things, you know, I got the good grades, I got the MBA, I was making the money, I had the status, I had the job title, I had all the things that I'd always wanted. And I could barely get out of bed in the morning. I was so miserable with my life. I was in tears half of the time, or not half of the time, but a lot of the time. And I would hide it. And I was drinking and I was partying and I was doing all these things to not be with the truth of my life, which was that I was completely out of alignment with my soul's purpose, with my mission on this planet, with who I really, really was. So before I tell you the rest of the story, I want to give you the opportunity to please like this video, subscribe to my channel. Please place your comment below. Tell me about your experience of discovering perhaps that you were out of alignment. I don't know. I'd love to hear about other people who've had a similar trajectory as me. So back to the story. I basically realized I was unhappy and still, this is important, I was still operating from the outside in. So instead of looking inward and saying, okay, what in me needs to change? What in me wants to be expressed? I was still looking outside of myself for the answers. And so I figured, well, if I'm unhappy, it was my job's fault. It was my boss's fault. It was everything outside of me. This is really, really important because all the work I do now in the world is about coming back to self, right? So I came to the conclusion that if I was unhappy, I needed a new job. I decided that's what I was going to do. And I started looking for a job. I got another job, very good pay. It was a good title. But within 2 months of the new job, I was miserable again. I was crying again. I was struggling to get out of bed again. The novelty wore off and we were right back where we were before. And so I did it again. I said, well, then maybe what it is that I don't need to have any more bosses. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to be my own boss. And so I quit my job and I said, all right, let's do this thing. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And guess what? Over the course of the next 7.5 years, I basically recreated the same circumstances all over again. But this time I was the boss. And this time when I had my final breakdown 7.5 years later, there was no one to blame but me. And I had to finally come to terms with the truth of my situation, which was that I was living my life for status, for significance, for success, for achievement, for money, for all the things, but I hadn't really come back to me and who I really was and what I really wanted in my life. So this was all precipitated by a very dramatic breakdown that I had. And this was about 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago now, where it all kind of came to a head. What I believe happened to me from a more, let's say, spiritual perspective is that the universe, God, spirit finally said, enough of this. I'm not going to let you keep living this lie. I'm going to take away all the things that you think are important so you can finally come back to what really, really matters. Come back to yourself. My health, I got a really serious health diagnosis. My personal relationship fell apart in a very dramatic fashion. I've told the story in other videos. I'm not going to get into it here, but suffice it to say I was engaged to be married. In one day, very suddenly, very surprisingly, I found out that the person I was supposed to marry wasn't who he said he was and wasn't what I thought he was. And so that happened. And then, of course, as I took the time to slow down, grieve these two things, and lick my wounds, the business fell apart. All of it, all in a span of a couple months. It all came crumbling down, and I broke down. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to just fully be in what I now call the basement, be all the way into the sadness and really what I say is I cracked open. And I cracked open because of the situation that I was facing. And when I cracked open, it wasn't just the situation I was facing that I was upset about or sad about or that I had regret about. It was my whole life from the very beginning. There was a pattern of trying to please others, of being what I thought the world wanted me, needed me to be, and what I should do and what I should be. And never, ever, ever had I really come back to figure out who I really was and what I really wanted to do. And so during this time of being in this basement is where I found my first spiritual and personal mentor. I'd had business coaches in the past, but I'd never had a real personal development coach, one who focused on me as the center of everything rather than on the things outside of me. And we started this process of delving deep, going inward, discovering myself and all this amazing stuff. And I basically reorganized my entire life, my entire business around my true self, what I was really here to do, what I really cared about, the work that I enjoyed the most. And in the last 8 years, my life has completely transformed as a result. And these videos that you see on YouTube are kind of a big part of the result of that. It's me sharing what I've learned along the way, the mistakes that I made, and the ways that I changed my life. And so today, what I do and what my heart and soul is all about, my purpose, my North Star, is to activate superstars to uplift humanity. And what that means is, what that looks like from a mission perspective, is that I help other superstars like me. And what I call a superstar is someone who has a big light to shine in the world, someone who has a gift of expression, someone who wants to be creative in service of others. I help them find the message, the mission, and the business model to bring their work into the world in a way that supports them, that brings joy, fulfillment, and prosperity to them, and also makes an impact and a contribution to others. And so from a value proposition perspective, now we're diving into more of the business of it. What that looks like is teaching them different ways to monetize their magic. And when I say monetize their magic, you may have heard me say this before, I'm very clear that I do not mean to monetize their time or their effort. I mean to monetize their magic, which is a lot more fun, a lot more joyful, a lot more scalable, a lot more stable. It's finding ways to leverage their time and create things in the world that drive monthly recurring revenues. And specifically, I specialize in this area of transformational events and retreats and immersion programs, breakthrough programs, mastermind groups, group coaching programs, ways that these superstars can bring their gifts to groups of people and activate and uplift those groups of people who then go out and activate and uplift other people. And so how I do that is I have my own retreats, which you may be watching this video because you're actually in a retreat right now, and I'm giving you this video as a foundational component of the program. And I also lead a group called the Influencer Circle, which is my passion and my heart. This is my community that I've built of superstars that are uplifting and inspiring and collaborating with each other. And it's the thing that I'm most grateful for having created, the thing I'm proudest of having created, and it's where I invest most of my time and my energy and my love. And so if you're someone who's a thought leader, a superstar, and this sounds like something you want to do and you haven't ever worked with me yet, then I invite you to check out superstaractivator.com/go, which is where you can learn about my programs, and you can even book a call with someone on my team or even with me. I look forward to meeting you.